Welcome back to our ongoing exploration of Worldwide Technology's AI journey. My name is Rob Boyd. In this episode, we get to revisit the progress made on a couple of internal AI projects. The first show aired at the beginning of the year, developed a framework for building AI-powered digital assistants. And our guests were Ankur Gupta as well as Dale Shu. They introduced us to two new Gen AI tools developed within Worldwide Technology that both had very distinct and specific business outcomes identified. It was fantastic. Still worth watching, given that it came out an eternity ago, about 6 months. Feels like an eternity. But now for today's show, we get to see what's changed. So the title of the research note is apt: How WWT, GPT, and RFP Assistant, those are the two new names, well, one of them changed, how they have evolved and what it means for the future. Now, we do lots of shows about AI as there's a lot to cover. But don't miss how great this is. You see, at a time when it feels like every organization in the world is scrambling, trying to figure out how to safely leverage what can still feel like magic, WWT is letting us peek behind the curtain. A rare opportunity to avoid the theoretical and see the reality behind what it takes to harness Gen AI and LLMs. And how smart is this, though? WWT is figuring this out for themselves, as every company should, but now they're also able to provide high-quality advice and guidance for clients that are seeking to do the same. That is a twofer. Today's guest expert is Parv Goel. He shares what's changed, what's working, and what's next. All that and more. Welcome to WWT Presents Research. Well, Parv, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I am very curious. I love the fact I feel like we've got a kind of an ongoing reality show here as Worldwide Technology is sharing with the world internal movements about how you guys are embracing the business benefits, both for yourself as well as, of course, I would assume getting smarter to help customers. Yeah. But being that you and I have not had a chance to work together before, I did this show on this topic 6 months plus ago, when this was kind of starting. Great to meet you. Tell us who Parv is. What do you do with Worldwide Technology?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm a consultant in our management consulting team. I live in New York. I'm based out of New York City, and I'm currently staffed on the internal Gen AI project at WWT. So as you've probably seen in past episodes that we've done, we're building these tools to drive a variety of outcomes for the business. And the consulting's team role in that is twofold. First is to provide guidance on it from a data science perspective on actually building these tools from a technical standpoint, but then also helping navigate the business outcomes that might come from using these tools, be it increased productivity, better quality of work, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, and there are a lot of benefits. And I feel like some of the challenges is because we've had a lot of different shows that aren't about WWT's involvement, but WWT's assistance and some customer stories. And it does seem like, boy, it's really hard to say, let's narrow down exactly what we should be achieving. But we talked about that on the first show in the sense that there were a lot more ideas that were kind of surfaced within Worldwide, where to focus. It ended up being, at least for the purpose of the show anyway, and what we were talking about was two different assistants, if you will. Some of those have changed, but I wonder if you could bring us up to date on what these two were and kind of what the original design goals were around them.
Yeah, of course. So the two main use cases within the Gen AI program are the WWT GPT and the RFP Assistant. So the WWT GPT was initially called the ATC Assistant, and the original design goals were mainly around the data sources being the WWT platform and our website, right? But in the last few months, we really started adding additional data sources, unlocking new use cases and functionalities for our users, like internal project documentation, information on some of the engagements that we've done with clients, long-form documentation on our solution areas, the services that we offer, and how various case studies have shaped up, Q&A pairs that our proposal team uses as well. All of that is being ingested within WWT GPT now to form like a high-level assistant for our sales and our services teams. Now, the RFP Assistant is a tool that we've developed that summarizes, qualifies, and generates full-length responses to RFPs, requests for proposals that we receive. But the original design goal was mainly centered around the summarization and the qualification piece of it. The generation has been something that we've just picked up in the last 6 or 7 months, have been really honing in on.
So I think this is going to the assistant formerly known as ATC Assistant. Yeah. So it feels like the name change is part of the fact that you're expanding what it's targeting and the sources the number of people that interact with it and such. Just to confirm, these are both internal tools, correct?
Yes, correct. They're
Okay,
internal
so it's
tools. Yep.
so this is really first and foremost about saying how do we use our own intellectual property and data in a proper manner, and with all the amazing wonderfulness that we've seen with LLMs, how do we do that in a safe and productive manner? And it feels like you guys have been very pragmatic about how you go about doing that. This may be stepping out of it a little bit, but just speaking to your expertise in general, how important is it to kind of work hard at the beginning to narrow down the scope of what you're going to achieve before you start expanding things like you're doing now? Because it feels like that was very specific or very
Absolutely.
planned that way. Yes.
No, it's a very important step of the process, right? Because
Okay.
what we believe in is having a use case led approach. But we get together with our leaders and we say, okay, what are some areas that we can work to optimize or improve productivity in within the company? All right, we have some use cases. How many people does this really impact? What is the bottom line effect of whatever we intend to build here? Once we get those narrow use cases, what is driving high value, then we get into some of those complexity conversations. What does the data around this look like? What is the final tool? Is it a chatbot? Is it an interface like the RFP assistant where you're actually generating something in a different sort of UI environment? Once we can answer both of those questions, what is the value and what is the data and the complexity around it, then we can kind of bring those together to target this narrow set of use cases. But the equation is incomplete without any one of those two parts, right? Because we can have the best use case in the world, but if we don't have the right data and enough data or data in the right format to answer that use case, then we can't really go after it. Similarly, for use cases, we need things that are going to drive organizational efficiency and productivity gains at a high level.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. This is what's interesting because I obviously, as I understand it, you guys are doing this not only to improve productivity and the different things that you've outlined, but it's also about learning as an organization because WWT is very often, of course, that's the whole job of the company, right? Is to be the smarter person in the room to help companies do this in a safe manner. And to a certain extent, the entire industry, it almost feels like we're all figuring this out. There's AI has been around a long time. Gen AI, a little bit less so. LLM, certainly brand new, relatively speaking, and they're changing awfully fast. And so it is hard to say, how do we do this in a proper manner? And so I think it's really cool that you guys share this. You mentioned kind of three areas where you've changed stuff, sticking to the WWT GPT. That's a lot of mouthful now that I think about it. But on that, when you talked about changes in across the data sources, the target audience, as well as kind of evolving it with the business. But speaking to the data sources, can you detail for me again what data sources you started with, what you got out of that, and then why you thought it was okay? Okay, why should we start adding more? Where did that come from?
Yeah, for sure. So with the primary use case and target audience of WWT GPT being our sales and services org, and then our client facing employees, wanting to drive productivity for them and help them quickly search past case studies, quickly search WWT related information about our solution areas, things that they would typically interface when talking to a client. We wanted to add data sources which help them go deeper into these use cases, right? So
Okay.
initially, the only data source that we had on there was WWT.com, right? It was all based on thought leadership, articles, press releases, content from our website that met all of these goals. We had a lot of general information about WWT. We had a lot of case studies on the website, information about our solution areas, etc. But
Mhm.
one point where that might have been lacking was actual technical information about how we've done certain projects, actual information about who our broader client base was, industry-wise classification. And I think when we've added, project documentation from our ATC, ServiceNow records from our from the ATC as well as documents from our proposal team, we've really gone into the specifics as to what we've done and how we've done it, rather than just having a high level overview from our website that's already posted on in the public domain. The point of this was to go deeper into those use cases and actually have more data, richer data to answer to the same use cases that we'd identified, so we could provide more robust information for our personnel.
Both of these assistants kind of remind me of a frustration starting as a salesperson 25, 30 years ago, where especially people in sales, since that's my example, but marketing and anywhere else, they need access to certain institutional knowledge. Finding it, I'm just kind of curious if I was to get that data prior to having the AI assistants working with me, would I assume you have to be really structured and go, okay, I need to follow a solution and then figure out, and then you had to figure out, oh, that ties into this, but that's into a different domain. You're doing that stuff manually. So I assume this is also good for just unearthing and really leveraging institutional data that may have lain fallow, kind of
Absolutely.
unused
Yep.
historically. So are you seeing an uptick in the intelligence that can be acted upon in a faster manner? Not to get into results, because I
Right.
do want to end with that, but I don't know, maybe just a little bit.
No, absolutely. I think so. The before and now are very different based on conversations that we're having with our power users fairly regularly, right? So we, in fact, just had a roundtable last week where our top users were telling us, earlier they would need to first find SMEs within WWT. They would
Right.
need to search the platform. They would need to look through their own SharePoint documents, reach out to people that they might know to get information on a certain topic that they might be researching about. But now, they have the ability to quickly scan documents across the company that were retrieved in a very systematic and comprehensive way for information. But GPT now also gives you the ability to search for experts. So if I just said, hey, give me our top SMEs on cloud or automation or security, it would give me a list of folks that I could reach out to immediately. So it's helping the process of reaching out to people
Yeah.
while also providing more information on the front end.
Because you just described what I go through all the time, and I've changed over time how I do this, because I've interviewed and featured so many smart people over time, and then what's kind of drove me nuts in my own personal processes is I can't always put my finger on who's the wireless person that was really good
Mhm.
at radio resource management or whatever it may be, and that becomes extremely important to my productivity. And I also want to know the people, because I've met a lot of people. Some I liked better than others, or in terms of a type of conversation. But one of the things I noticed is you guys are extremely well organized and have made a lot of investments in the pages, what we call the platform, that I can see as a registered user, but not an employee. And so you've got a wealth of articles. From your perspective, has WWT always or put an effort into structuring the data, even in the website? Because I can go through an article and I can see who are all the contributors,
Mhm.
and that is extremely helpful right off the bat because of the way it's organized. But some of this LLM stuff is also now working with unstructured data, I understand. So I'm curious, where does it helped based on how WTB's run things internally? And maybe have you uncovered anything that you wish you'd done differently as you're starting to ingest this data?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I'll start with things that have been done really well. I think the platform has been extraordinarily well organized for something that we didn't expect to ever use in a Gen AI tool maybe 5 or 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, right? We have authors, contributors of articles. We have everything organized in different solution areas, case studies. Everything's very well done on the platform, and that's helped augment our responses within GPT because it provides a lot of metadata for the LLM to draw
Yeah.
from, right? So, what I was just talking about right now with the ability to find experts, a lot of those experts are drawn from authors that have written articles about certain subject areas, right? Now,
My favorite. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and I think that's really helped both quicken the development that we've done, but also provide richer outputs of
Yeah.
generations of responses. Now, where I think companies should continue to put effort is on organizing that and also making sure that the format of the various data provided on a website is in a format that is able to be ingested by these RAG or these GPT models, because that's something that's an exercise that we've undertaken over the last year or so, making sure that all the different markdowns on the pages, making sure that all the different portions of a certain web
Mm.
page or of a certain part of the platform are in a format that our vector databases and our GPT can understand and ultimately spit out as content as well. So I think that's the only thing that companies should be cognizant of moving forward. But I think the organization definitely goes a long way in improving the responses, but also helping the process.
Yeah, it feels like that's one of the big things, because I've had a lot of security discussions and a lot of data integrity type of conversations. Because I think we can all see, if we've played with LLMs at all, on an individual personal basis, you can go, wow, that's powerful. And then you begin realizing that the more context you can provide, the better the response you're going to get. And the accuracy is so much higher if it's working on data that you've provided versus just trying to create something from whole cloth, which it can certainly do and will always do, but may not necessarily be correct or in the right direction. So it's easy to say, wow, this is going to be valuable with internal data, assuming that we can do it correctly. As you guys added data sources additionally, I think I read, did you have a testing methodology for kind of running it through the model to say, are we consistent with the results, like putting in known questions where you know the answers? How did that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Testing is a big part of what we do. Every time we add a data source, even if we make a small change on the UI, we always make sure that we're testing the inputs and the outputs for consistency. We have established an evaluation framework which automatically tests all of the responses coming out of the GPT. And how that works is we have about 150 canned queries that we have stored away. And every time we push a change to production or we add an additional data source, we run those same queries through GPT, and the responses get graded by an LLM, which we've trained with our own rubric. Maybe trained is the wrong word, but we've provided the context of a rubric for so it can grade those responses on completeness, accuracy, relevance, context, and a variety of other indicators to make sure that the score is ticking up every time we add or enhance to GPT in some way. So, for example, when we added our latest data source, which was around proposal the proposal team documentation. When that happened, we took these 150 queries, ran these through GPT again, and then scored each response again through the LLM to make sure that the scores were higher than last time, so that that additional content was not muddying the water in some way or adding context or data points that weren't relevant to the question being asked.
Well, as I think about how you're using the rubric and you're using these different methodologies each time you say you make a change to kind of test for consistency and that you're ticking up in capabilities, as you mentioned, with your power users, I'm always thinking, one of the challenges is if you don't, at least historically, maybe it's not as bad with Gen AI anymore, but I felt like when you were rolling something out, if your users lost trust in something because of their interaction with it not being what they expected or what they wanted or needed, perhaps, which could be a number of factors, it can really set you back and be difficult to overcome. Is that part of the pragmatic, slow rollout? I say slow, it's really not slow. It's really more, what's the right word? Pragmatic, I keep coming back to. I feel like I could do my thesaurus search at some point. But yeah, is it important building trust in users to understand what they can do and what they can't do so that they're not getting disillusioned, perhaps?
Absolutely. We're very thoughtful about the way we roll things out and about the way we communicate details about each rollout. We have a group of every user that's added to the tool. Every time there is an enhancement, we're very prescriptive about what this enhancement will enable them to do. And we also share details about what it might not be able to do, so that users aren't necessarily turned off or disappointed in the tool overall just because it doesn't answer to one specific use case. So that, I think, communication is one part of it. One thing that we're trying to control for now is also reaching out to users that have churned to educate them more and more on what is changing in the tool. So we have we have frequent analyses of query data to see, if a user churned back in February because they asked 3 or 4 queries that didn't answer to a certain type of use case that they were hoping for, but a new data source or a new enhancement now provides the ability to answer to that use case, then we're definitely very intentional about identifying those churned users and then reaching out to them to say, hey, this is something you tried, but here is we are now able to answer to this use case if you want to come back and become a regular user of the product. The adoption and the churning of users is something that every company thinks about for not only internal products but more so for consumer products or applications that B2B applications, B2C applications. So that's something that we also think about very, very carefully internally, and it's data that we're all tracking and monitoring to make sure that we're maximizing adoption in that regard.
And that makes sense, right? Because you would expect to see a growth in usage, not a drop off, because people should be finding value in this.
Yes.
And if they're not, then that might be a good lead signal to dig into and go, what happened? Maybe you just got busy. Maybe you're on vacation, whatever, maybe. But yeah, I understand. That makes sense. You may not be able to or not want to answer this, but I'm just kind of curious because we talk about shadow AI, creeping in, and different organizations have different rules. Many more than I would have thought seem to be letting employees access external tools for daily use, even on company-owned equipment and such like this. I'm just curious if is there a policy around WWT and employees experimenting with external tools, or is there a process? Because it feels like you're doing the best thing I've always recommended, back from the days of cloud and shadow cloud, which is give employees what they want, and you won't have as many issues with them running into other areas that potentially endanger the company unnecessarily. Can you comment at all on how WWT looks at that internally? Because you got some of the smartest users. I would imagine it could be very difficult to control your users in many situations because they're just, yeah,
Now, there are specific policies that the company has put in place, but overall, I think the general sense is this: no proprietary data should end up in a external tool that might become a part of that tool's training data.
yeah,
Other than that, we are very AI forward in that respect, where we want users to know what's going on out there and what different tools exist, but to be very, very careful with the data that they actually put into these
yeah,
tools. Having said that, we do have internal instances of various tools that users can use on the WWT networks to make sure that that data is not being sent to a place that it doesn't belong. So, for example, we have been recently experimenting with Microsoft Copilot licenses internally. We also have within WWT GPT another flow, which is secure Chat GPT, which is a private instance of Chat GPT that we've spun up, so that users can use it without necessarily having the risk of sending data somewhere that they would not intend to. So the policies are in place, but we also have some mechanisms internally to allow users to experiment in a safe
yeah.
environment, if you will.
Yeah, I like that. But I tell you, so because this all fits in with the stuff that excites me when it's talking about being a former salesperson, switching to the RFP process, what a painful process. At least back when I used to have to do it. And so it was easy for me to imagine how manual it was, because every RFP I ever received when I briefly worked with a lot of schools and government institutions for part of my sales career in the day, and every one of the RFPs would be hugely detailed and very difficult to parse and figure out. And you had this pressure on you because they're asking for a lot of money. We certainly want to win that, assuming that it's appropriate for our business, because that's the other part of an RFP, is deciding if you even want to respond to it, because it may not be business you want. You may not be best suited for it. And making that decision can really make a big difference in how much money is spent in the process and how much people's time is wasted. WWT, as in many things, invested in this with RFP people, a department, a set of people that were there to help make that easier. But it was still somewhat of a manual process. I think it's a huge step forward, but I would imagine a lot of things still couldn't be done. What's happened with the using Gen AI and LLMs now to take over this process? What's been the growth and change here that's good to understand?
Yeah. So I think the goal behind the RFP assistant was mainly to streamline that whole process, right? So, for example, the summarization portion of it, initially when an RFP came in, a lot of folks in various account teams are involved with that, right? So we have our salespeople, we have subject matter experts, we have technical folks, engineers, all involved in selling and maintaining an account. Now, sending them a 30, 40-page RFP, having everyone read it, having everyone be on the same page, that is somewhat of a clunky process.
Yeah.
But what the summarization module here does is a quick summary and the ability to chat with the RFP to get key points from various
Chat with the
personas
RFP. I
out
love
in a
that.
single UI flow, so that we can distribute that among folks in an account team, so that everyone's on the same page from the get go. And then if someone wants to do a more in depth reading of the RFP, then they can. I think that's the number one part of
Yeah.
the process that is streamlined a lot, and it's already providing value for our proposal teams and some of our sales teams as well. I think beyond that, the qualification piece is providing a lot of value around quickly being able to see statistics related to an RFP. So, how many RFPs in the past have we won with this client? How many similar
Mm.
RFPs have we won that are with a similar technology or similar service area or whatever it might be? And obviously, generation is a piece that adds a lot of value just from a time savings perspective. But that's still something that's very much in the works. We're iterating on it day by day and improving it, and that's something that we are getting up to that level that the entire proposal team can generate a lot of value out of.
What kind of changes have you guys made in this one between the time we last spoke in the previous show versus now? What type of things have been improved? I assume it's also gone through a growth process,
Yep,
yes?
absolutely. So with generation specifically, we've done a lot of improvements on the data sources themselves. So we learned a lot about the data sources in the process of building the tool. Which data sources make sense, which ones don't. Removing certain data, adding metadata to certain data sources, so we were able to better retrieve content from them. So that's been one part of it, the actual data cleaning exercise that's gone on. At the same time, we've put the RAG framework itself through various iterations. So we made a lot of improvements, in fact, on GPT in re-ranking and the ability to get the most accurate context out of data. And we brought that over to the RFP assistant as well. So we were getting the most accurate snippets of data out of the various data sources that we have. So those are some examples of the improvements that it's gone through. Now, on summarization qualification, a lot of that has been, back-end prompting, defining better what a similar RFP is on the qualification front, bringing in, important fields, important metadata around what service area this is, what customer this is, what size of deal this is, to make sure that we're driving a very accurate definition of similar RFP. And then on the summarization front, making sure that we're accurately and exhaustively bringing information out from the RFP itself. So there have been, prompt engineering changes, changes to the way that we define similar RFPs, and other changes that have brought about changes, improvements within the app itself.
How extensively has that rolled out so far? Is it being used by frontline salespeople or only a select group? And what other groups may be involved with this that you even hope to kind of diminish, lower the number of people that have to be involved in the process going forward? Yeah.
So right now it's with our proposal teams, right? So they are using it day to day. They're running RFPs through it. Now the hope is that all sales team at some point will have access to this tool as well, because that's when it starts to really drive an organizational level of productivity increase and efficiency gains. Yeah. But currently, we see this as kind of like a very intense power testing with a large user group that are running new RFPs through it day in and day out. We're also doing a lot of retroactive testing to get the tool up to speed. But it's kind of a mix of both there.
I'm curious, and I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. I learn a lot as I do these things in those manual processes. And so I'm a little bit hesitant, and maybe it's just a silly thing to worry about, but that I'm not going to be as in tune with the information because I didn't really have to work as hard at it. But yet I do need to present it well. I need to interact well. I need to be a good steward. You have any thoughts on that being something we should all watch for? Maybe it's a personal question, but going forward, how important is that to think about?
Look, I think when it comes to the RFP assistant specifically, the tool is meant to be a co-pilot rather than an autopilot, right? So
nice.
All proposal team members, all folks using the tool are still encouraged to do their research. They're still, doing thorough readings of the RFPs themselves, engaging with these data sources now through WWT GPT as well. The point of the tool is to opt to streamline the process a little bit and then help them get past that initial hurdle of starting the RFP and being able to organize it. Because within the assistant itself, there's a way to organize the outline, put the table of contents down on a page for an RFP. All of that adds value from an organizational standpoint, which also improves the quality of the end product. So those are all some of the parts of the RFP assistant that are driving the most value. And the idea here is that the content generation piece itself is supposed to get you part of the way there, but the rest of it is still very much dependent on your research, on your ability to pick up details about these solution areas, these clients, your ability to extract information and make it relevant to the RFP, which are still very important parts of the process. But this just helps streamline some of those more organizational, kind of foundational aspects of proposal writing.
Where do you see you guys going next? How much is planned based on what you've learned so far about next steps or things you want to tackle, especially if there's any big hurdle you have yet to overcome or maybe newly identified in this area?
Yeah. Look, I think when it comes to the RFP assistant specifically, we have made a lot of good progress on the tool itself. I think we still need to continue iterating on this version, making sure that our similar RFPs are completely up to the mark, making sure that our summaries are on point, and they have the ability to be distributed among account teams, and that our generations are at a point that are driving time savings for the teams, right? There are improvements that we're making day in and day out to the backend prompts, to the RAG infrastructure itself. And these are the next steps are very much kind of within the realm of improving the tool in its current form. Now,
Yeah.
when it comes to WWT GPT, we have a good kind of stake in the ground right now for, where we are. From here, we want to continue to add additional data sources, continue to iterate on the RAG model to make sure that we're driving the highest accuracy and the highest quality of response outcome. We want to add data sources that bring in other teams perhaps and drive additional use cases for those teams, and then also looking towards what we can do with WWT GPT externally. How can it maybe at some point in time serve our partners and our customers as well, are all within the realm of next steps there.
Has there been any increase in customers asking specifically about what you guys are doing here? And you guys are great about formalizing guidance and doing workshops and briefings and different things. And I'm sure you've got some customers you're very deeply embedded with in many different ways. How much involvement is there externally with watching you guys go through this and potentially emulating it themselves, or looking at learning from your mistakes first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have an entire, AI go-to-market team that's having conversations with clients day in and day out. What's good is that anything that we pitch around Gen AI is predicated in a journey that we've already taken ourselves. So, we're using a lot of these learnings in our executive briefings, in our sales pitches. And with the recent interest upticking in Gen AI overall, we get a lot of questions from customers about, replicating this, doing something, building a GPT for them, or building similar tools with different use cases for them. And we're able to answer that call a lot more effectively and with a lot more knowledge coming from a place of experience with our own tools. And because of that, we've kind of have very close connection with the internal program, between the internal program and our go-to-market side. We're always making sure that we're communicating learnings, keeping them in the loop, having weekly meetings to make sure that the folks talking to customers are completely on board with what we're doing as well. So there has been definitely a big uptick in interest and a very noble effort to answer to that interest based on our own experience.
I tend to stay to all the positive stuff, but I'm just curious, have anything on either parts of this journey, anything that's come up that surprised you in terms of things you needed to overcome, didn't expect, had to work into a process, anything like that might be helpful to share?
I think one thing, and this is going to be with any Gen AI tool, is that it's all very new. And when it comes to tools like the RFP assistant, we're building them into a workflow that proposal team members have been building for decades, right? We have proposal managers on our team that have been around for a long time. So I think one part of it is just having the patience and the understanding that, these are tools that are completely new. They're changing the ground beneath us as we know it for a lot of teams that are leveraging these tools. So having the patience to first, build tools that are compatible with their processes, but then also putting a very careful attention on user education and user awareness to make sure that no one's feeling left out by this and everyone's kind of being brought along for the journey, because it will ultimately have benefits for them. I think that's been a part of this whole process that I maybe didn't really think about that much coming in. Maybe that was just my naivety, but it's something that I've really kind of gained an appreciation for during this project, and I've really sought to bring users along in the journey as well.
Yeah, everybody's not sure about how scared they should be about, are you going to move my cheese, and things like this, because I think a proposal manager is like, oh, great, let me help you build a tool to replace me. But I don't think that's what you guys are thinking of it as, because it sounds like you're enabling new things to happen, plus at a scale. Am I right? It feels like you guys have built a foundation here. If I really compare where you've been over the last 6 months to a year in this process, it feels like it was about building a foundation that you could scale upon. Now you're starting to slowly scale it. But do you feel like that the overall structure of something to build upon, at least for these tool sets, has been laid and you can build on it now? Is that kind of a way to characterize it?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've done a good job of laying that foundation, keeping everyone in the loop, be it the executive teams that lead these groups that we're building tools for, or the internal development team. So the foundation is definitely there, both technically and from an organizational perspective. Now we're working on scaling it, and our goal will always be to drive productivity gains for our teams, so that they can focus on more business development activities, better quality of work, etc. Using these tools as a co-pilot, not necessarily to replace them or anything like that.
Yeah, I like your wording on that.
But the idea here is that even for something like the RFP assistant, with those time savings, we're now able to make sure that the proposals that we're putting out are a little more polished, are a little more rich in the content that they have maybe a couple more scans of the eyes from our subject matter experts, which will hopefully improve outcomes at the end of the road.
Yeah.
So the goal here is definitely to really embed these tools as co-pilots and scale them out on this foundation that we've already built.
It's amazing. I think it's just fun to watch, and it's fun to go through. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that you were counting on providing, perhaps, that we didn't come up in conversation already?
No, I think that covers it. I think at the end of the day, and I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but productivity gains and efficiency gains is what we're ultimately after. And every tool, every decision that we make is all in that same direction. And yeah, we're super excited about what the future holds here.
Well, this is excellent. Parv, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us and share. I assume, because we've done this now, that there's going to be a third show in 6+ months. Actually, at the pace things change, we might need to do them more often. But I'm excited by this, and I think it's neat that you guys are taking the audience along the journey and sharing it. I just think what a great collaborative and open process.
Absolutely.
I don't see a lot of people doing that, and I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But so, Parv, thank you so much for taking this time.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
All right, for those eager to dive deeper into this topic, don't forget today's research note titled How WWT GPT and RFP Assistant Have Evolved and What It Means for the Future. For those of you looking to get a little bit more technical, perhaps you were saying, man, I wish they had a little bit more technical detail, because we did purposefully try to stay away from that and focus on outcomes. But here's where you need to go. Just follow this whole page, Artificial Intelligence and Data. It's this section on WWT.com. Very good information there. In fact, I want to point out this 5-part series. It's really good. These are the technical details for everything we just discussed. So as you can see, there are a lot of great resources to leverage here, so it's on you to actually leverage them. But the key takeaway here is just to, at a minimum, keep learning, right? Stay curious. The AI landscape is evolving rapidly, and staying ahead means staying curious. Whether you're just starting out or well along your AI path, there is always more to discover. Boy, isn't that the truth? My name is Rob Boyd. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again on the next WWT Presents Research.